Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Real Estate Chat with Robert Eid
John De Perez.
and Robert, I have a question for you. Have you ever been late to a birthday party and they've already sang happy birthday, they've blown out the candles, and you're eager to find that piece of cake, but they didn't save any for you? Have you ever had a situation like that?
You mean there's not enough cake to go around?
There's not enough cake for everyone. Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't get your slice of cake? Well, you know what? The article that you shared with me uses that exact quote that there's not enough cake for everyone. And we're not talking about cake, Ashley. We're talking about real estate transactions in this current market. So a couple of numbers for you first, and then I'll pull up the article, is in 2022, according to the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board's Market Watch, 75,082 is the number of recorded MLS buy and sells, like transactions that occurred in the entire year of 2022. That means if you're looking at it as ends, which means how many actual parties involved, on one side is the buyer, on one side is the seller, you multiply that by 2, and that's 150,164. Now, according to the Canadian Real Estate Association, the number of realtors in Toronto's board was 70,202 as of Q4 2022. And while these are not, going to be exact 100% numbers because membership goes up and down, transactions based on what's recorded, that works out to, as Robert guessed it in our pre-show discussion, about 2.139 transactions per realtor. And I'm going to pull up the article that Robert shared with me, and then we're going to dissect it. It's in the Financial Post, entitled "The Spring Housing Market Could Bring a Reckoning, Robert, for realtors in Canada," and that the realtor's fate depends on whether buyers and sellers return in force and how that will affect prices. And where we got this cake quote is straight up. They interviewed one of the realtors, I believe it was a newer realtor, and basically they said there's just not enough cake for everyone. We're going to share the link of this article. But Robert, why isn't there enough cake for everyone? And should that be a concern for the general public?
Well, okay. Should it be a concern for the general public? No, because they're not dealing with 70,000 members and they're not dealing with 150,000 ends. They're dealing with their own situation, and they're dealing with their own selection based on their own method of deciding of who they will deal with or not deal with. So they're going to deal with their friend. They're going to deal with their past registrant associate friend in the business, or they're going to go into an open house and find someone that way and buy in that neighborhood. So you're always looking for someone who understands you, who knows what you want, and seems to be in a position to give you what you want, even if you don't like them. But if they know your market, then you'll deal with them. So sharing evenly, it never is the case anyway. Having enough cake, well, it's tough beans. It's a shark-infested waters and dog-eat-dog business, if we're using analogies and parallels. And so I believe it was someone who, when they had another job during the pandemic, didn't have to go to work, continued to get their real estate license online, because that's how it was done. And now they went through all the whole process of being registered, and they're in their orientation phase, apprenticeship phase in the first 2 years. And they're finding out, is this something for them? Now, that also brings up the key ingredient that many people are promised great things about the real estate business. And now that each deal is $15,000 or $20,000 or more, depending on the price range you're working in, and it can be, but a great number of these 70,000 are part-timers. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a part-timer as long as you can be available and you can do the full job, but it's a drain on your job or on your career if you have another job. So many of these folks were doing transactions that didn't require a great deal of time. They're doing new home worksheet, condo worksheet, so they don't have to go anywhere. They can just do it all on internet. And then the other part of it is, like, everybody's got to start sometime. I had to start sometime. You had to start sometime. And you make a transition from whatever you're doing before into what you're doing now. And some do it well and some do it poorly. But the big difference now is we have teams which are offices within offices, and you've got a powerhouse individual who's driving it and getting leads from the internet and from listings all over the place, and established presence. And then the business comes in, is fed off to the people who are their apprentices, their mentees, if that's such a word. And so it's not an even, Stephen, even the 80-20 that we've said, oh, well, 80% of the sales are made by 20% of the people. It's probably more like 90-10, that of the 70,000, a lot of them are starving. We've seen other stats. I'm sure you get them as a recruiting manager too, where there's a huge number that make less than 6 deals in a year. And there's a huge number that make less than 1 deal a year.
And there's a lot of different, and it's a good analysis and insight that Robert has shared with us. And, when I talk to registrants about this, and, some of you watching Real Estate Chat and you've clicked like and subscribe. And for those of you who don't like this discussion so far, you've disliked it, that's okay too. Type in why in the comments. But I've talked to a lot of our fellow registrants about this, and some of them say, hey, you know what? What if the local real estate board charged $20,000 a year for a membership on the board? Wouldn't that reduce the number of registrants and, for lack of a better term, put the more serious registrants at the forefront, because they actually have to pay serious amounts of money to be in this business? But then you look at it and, whether it's the licensing body, whether it's the board, not to say it's good or bad, because we can't comment about whether these are good or bad to a certain degree. Look at it purely from a business perspective. It is, as Robert put it, dog eat dog, because it is as hardcore business as you can get. Yes, you can buy your license, you can buy the education, you can get qualified, you can pass the examinations. Once you're there, you're not handed business unless you've got great connections, great family. Sure, I mean, you can maybe perhaps call that being handed business, but everybody else who doesn't have that big circle or that giant sphere of people that they know, you've just entered a business, and you're responsible for generating the opportunities and conversations. And when you look at what Robert said, when you're looking at a commission check of 15,000, 20,000, the average price that Robert estimated for March would be falling around what, 1.1-ish, just a touch over 1.1-ish, 2.5% of that. If you were on the buyer side of that, that's like what? Let's just do it on a million. 2.5 on a million is 25 grand. So you do 2.139 deals of that, you're at 50,000. What's the average income? I mean, you don't have to answer this, but what's the average income where you're at, where you're watching this? And then, of course, that in itself brings an allure, right? So looking at this from a real estate agent perspective is, do I get into this business where, hey, if I don't have what it takes to be able to identify opportunities and conversations to generate this type of business, is it worth it for me? As Robert said, in the article that you can click on the link to read it, yes, these were registrants who were doing something else and then got into real estate. And many of the times it's you see on social media, you see the allure of being a real estate agent, and you don't quite see what the challenges are that are involved and what you really have to do with it. So Robert, somebody who's getting into, so we'll ask Robert 2 pieces of advice. One is from the agent perspective, one is from the consumer perspective. So a real estate agent looking to get into this business today, or somebody who got into this business within the past 2 or 3 years during pandemic times. I know you started in what, the 70s in real estate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how does somebody build longevity into their business?
Well, just like Remax Hallmark and many of the larger firms that have a training program, they show you how to have multiple sources of income. So you're not relying on any one thing, because that one thing may dry up. For example, when I first started, we did private sales. Oh, every day in the Toronto Star, there was like 15 people who wanted to sell their house themselves. So you phone them and you get nothing. You phone them again the next day, and finally, maybe on the weekend, you'd go over there and see them. You sit down, have a coffee, and shoot the breeze. And they'd say, of all the real estates that came around here, you're the most reasonable one. If ever I give up, I'll get you to help me. And that was the method of converting for sale by owners to being a listing. So when that all dried up, then the internet came, all this, it all dried up. So you've got, how do you do it? You do it by having some money behind you. You do it by having multiple sources of revenue, and you have it by being very charming. And there's not much else.
And if you've got that, then you've got your piece of cake. Right now, the consumers today, they've got a choice. They've got, they got their Remax Hallmark agents. They've got their, prominent real estate brand agents. They've got their family, friends. They've got their, the uncle who does it part-time because the full-time job is something else. Like, these are all realities. A consumer today, Robert, how should they choose? And I know this sounds like a cliche question, but we're going to ask it anyway. How should a consumer choose their real estate agent?
Well, you're either going to go for the money part or the service part. And that's what everybody does during the boom. They said, who will do this job, which was take one day at the cheapest price? And they figured that all of the people who had a license were interchangeable. Nobody did anything much better. And perhaps at the time, there was no negotiating. It was just a matter of setting a path. I want this amount. And then the offers come in and you pick the best of them. So it was just a madhouse. Now, as for a buyer, now you need someone with a whole different set of skills that can negotiate that mess, but to represent you. Because the seller was very easy. This is really a listing business, finding people who will deal with you and selling their house, because the whole business starts from there. If you have a sign on somebody's lawn or an ad news, that it attracts other buyers to you. It attracts people down the street, across the way. I want to sell in a while. My mother was thinking of it. It starts with listing. So we're maybe going to go through a new era when they finally get this a revamp to the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act modifications implemented. It'll probably be this year sometime. But we'll figure out a way to do exactly what we're doing now, except slightly differently in the new era. And the question you asked me is, what does the consumer do? The consumer is going to do exactly what they did before, is who's telling me the truth? Who do I trust? And who do I feel like investing my loyalty in? The transaction just comes, but it's really liking them and trusting them.
That's it. Do you know them, you like them, and you trust them? And that's really what it is. So if you're a real estate agent listening to this, you got to have these factors. And I mean, yes, we can't discriminate between part-time and full-time agents. But as Robert pointed out earlier, if you're not responsive and somebody wants to see a house at 2 o'clock this afternoon and you're stuck in your 9-to-5 job, how are you going to do that? Right? How are you going to do a home inspection if the only time that the home inspector is available and the buyers are available are during your work hours? And let's say you work the night shift, but they want to see it at 7 o'clock in the evening, right? So you got to have that availability. And if you are looking to make your move in real estate, do your research, watch the previous episodes of Real Estate Chat. Feel free to chat with us on our comment section. Robert and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Read the blogs, unclebobexplains.com. Fantastic charts, graphs, and information, and fun-filled facts and data there for you. And keep on watching and sharing Real Estate Chat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you got your piece of cake from this episode. We hope you enjoy it. We'll see you in the next episode of Real Estate Chat. Bye for now.
Bye for now.